Hey everyone, my name is Selina IG and I am a structural engineer working at an engineering firm called Arup. I've been in the industry for around 3 years now. So I studied structural engineering and architecture at the University of Sheffield and I graduated in 2017. But yeah, I'm working at Arup at the moment as a structural engineer.
Thank you, Selina, for that lovely introduction. What inspired you into engineering?
Yeah, so whenever I look back, I always think that it seems like I've chose the industry, so the built environment industry, before I actually chose what it is that I wanted to do. So from a young age, I've had a fascination with architecture and buildings and all that kind of things. It was only really when I was in A-levels really that when I sat down and thought, what do I want to study? Like, what do I want to study in university or what do I want to do in the future? I narrowed it down to either like working as a structural engineer or working as an architect. And I actually ended up finding a degree that combined both of them at the University of Sheffield. So studied it at uni, did a few internships. So I did an internship at an architecture firm and another internship at an engineering consultancy. And that's like
What engineers do?
Yeah, so I think a good way that I've seen it being described is like looking at the analogy of a human being. So when you look at a person, what the structure is basically the skeletal system. So it's what keeps the human body up, it keeps it strong, able to move around and all that kind of things. So when you translate it into buildings, what structural engineers do is that we design the structural components of things like floors, walls, beams, foundations, and essentially those things that keep the building standing up. We make sure that it's stable, it's not being like toppling over with wind or snow or anything like that. Yeah, that's what we design.
Lovely. I like your analogy to the human body because I think everything needs a structure in general. Everything needs a structure. What skills do you think is very essential or key to engineers, or you can make it specific to structural engineering?
Yeah, so I think what I love about the role is really that it is so multifaceted. Like it requires so many different types of skills. So there's the analytical skills that you need to do calculations and design structural elements and things like that. There's also the problem solving and creativity that's required to solve problems when it comes to engineering. So for example, in a structural engineering context, if like the architect wants to have like a big column-free space and you're not allowed to put any columns in it, then how do you go about it and how do you solve that problem to make sure that the building's still stable whilst providing that vision? There's also the teamwork skills that's really required. So as structural engineers, we don't just work by ourselves, we work in a multidisciplinary team. So we work with architects and we work with other engineers such as geotechnical engineers or mechanical electrical engineers to make sure that the design's well thought out and that it's holistic. We also work with contractors to make sure that the building can be built in a safe manner on site and that everything's sort of like thought out, the construction sequence is thought out. We also work with clients and quantity surveyors. So there's a whole host of people that we basically work with. So teamwork and communication skills is absolutely essential. Another skill that I kind of like learned about as I got into the industry is commercial skills is actually quite important as well within the industry. So knowing how much certain materials cost or how much it costs to bring certain equipments into site to build certain things, and how much people's time and resourcing also costs as well. All those kind of things is really important to make sure that the design is not only built on time, it's also built within budget as well. So a lot of different skills. It's a very multifaceted role, which I absolutely love.
So to follow up on that, I know you mentioned the last one being commercial awareness. Was this something that you learned or something that you picked up on the job?
Pretty much picked up on the job. So talking to contractors and talking to quantity surveyors, you kind of like pick up these things as you go along. I think like the company does provide certain training courses so that you can go into and like build up your knowledge in that way. But yeah, within the last 3 years, it's only recently really that I've picked up on it.
Thank you. What has been probably one of the most challenging parts of being an engineer, especially when we start to look at gender, male-female ratios? What have you found most challenging about that in your work role?
So specifically talking about challenging when it comes to it being a male-dominated field, I think definitely like the stats and everything show that females are a minority within the engineering field, and there's definitely been occasions where I've been in meetings and I look around and I'm the only woman in the meeting, or even the only person of color in the meeting too. So it is a fact. I think per se it hasn't really been something that's been a barrier to me. I think it's great that people have acknowledged it, and it is a well-known factor within the industry. I think people just need to be a bit more inclusive and try to like include everyone into certain meetings, make sure everyone's ideas are heard and feel respected in that manner. I think it's slowly improving. I mean, I've only been in the industry for around 3 years, but I have also been in meetings where I am just one of the many female engineers in the meetings too. So there are role models out there showing that we are here, we can progress. There is a potential for us to get into that position as well. And I think we all have a responsibility really to make sure that it is an inclusive environment.
And what would you say is the most rewarding part of being an engineer?
Oh, hands down. I think the most rewarding part of being a structural engineer is really seeing the ideas transform from just an idea, so a few sketches or drawings or a rough computer model, into like a building that's fully formed. Like, it's an amazing feeling just being able to go out and point out and say, oh, you know that building, like I worked on that aspect of it, or like I've been in Manchester at one point and kind of like walked by this apartment block that I was helping design, and I saw that it was like completely finished. I wasn't working on that project anymore, but then I was like, oh, like I worked on that, and my sister was there too. Yeah, like she was there, and I asked her to like take a photo of me in front of it, and it was an awesome feeling.
What advice would you give to young girls or people who are still considering engineering as a career? In relation to structural engineering, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think definitely I would say that working within engineering, it's such a fulfilling role. Like there's so much that you can learn from it. There's so many different projects that you can work on, so many different types of people that you can work with. It is a great career. It's a very well-respected career. There's good job progression and everything as well. So I would really encourage young girls to consider it. In terms of if they want to find out a little bit more about it, I would also encourage them to reach out to people like steminspires, for example. Listen to the episodes that you've been doing, like speaking with other women in engineering. Learn a bit more. Learn about what type of engineering that you'd want to would be interested in or want to pursue, because there's so many different types of engineering. What industry? So for example, for me, I knew I wanted to work in buildings, but I didn't know what I wanted to do in it. Did a bit of research and I became a structural engineer out of it. So there's definitely a lot of resources out there. Have a look, see what tickles your fancy, and then go for it. Reach out to people, ask questions. Yeah.
And then following up from what you said, so I know you start with your ideas and then there's a structure somewhere on site. So do you get the opportunity so far in your job role, do you get the opportunity going back and forth between site to be maybe in an office where you're getting your sketches, your designs done? Or what happens?
I'd say it depends on which stage of the project you are, like that ratio between working in the office and being out on site. So for example, if you're doing like a refurbishment project, then it's likely that you'll be out on site to do some surveys and things like that, like take pictures, site photos, so they can take back and review. Or if you're doing like a new build design, then usually the early part of the process, it's just designing it in the office, and then when it goes out to construction, out to site, then you do that like back and forth between office and site, basically to make sure that what it is that you've designed is what's actually being built out on site. I think at the moment, the projects that I'm working on, one is a refurb, so I have been on site a few times. And then the other, I'm actually working on a bridges project as well. So I've been out on site like once just to do a little bit of a survey, but most of it is office based. So yeah, during this lockdown period, I've just been at home most of the time, really in my little home office. Yeah.
What kind of support have you gotten aside from your company, which you said gives you a lot of training? And then I know you work with a multidisciplinary team just to get these projects running and going. What, aside from that, do you have any other support just to help you through this experience?
As in this lockdown experience?
Not necessarily lockdown. I feel like lockdown is really special, but yeah, you can talk about lockdown and then maybe life before lockdown. What that support system was. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think generally as a support system, it is mostly within my company. So I have the usual, my initial support system would be my peers. So speaking with peers, if I have a certain question, a certain problem to solve, which I can't really get around, I just use them as a sounding board and just bounce ideas off. So they're like my immediate support system. And then after that, I'd say my line manager. So I usually have like a one-to-one catch up with her every month, just to touch base and see, how I'm doing, how I think my career is progressing, and things like that. But I will say that it is up to you, the engineer itself, to make sure that that relationship keeps going, because they're very busy people. Yeah. It's really hard to put something down in their schedule, so make sure that you have like a reoccurring calendar invite, just as like a reminder for yourself and for them too, because I think that's really important to have that, to have that relationship going, and make sure that you they're aware of like any sort of if you have any issues, or if say you want to work on like a certain project that you think is upcoming, then to have that dialogue ongoing. So yeah, my peers, my line manager, I'd say on my professional development side of things, I also have a mentor within my company who's helping me with my chartership progress. So I have a meeting or a catch up with him every quarter, so every 3 months, to make sure that I'm along the right tracks. If I want to achieve a certain thing, like if I want to gain experience in the commercial awareness, but I don't know how to do it, then I'm like, I've had this experience, but I want to get a bit more experience. Like, do you have any tips and tricks on what I can do, or I don't know, certain things to look out for, that sort of thing. So yeah, I'd say my peers, my line manager, and my mentor are like my main support system.
Shout out to mentors. I feel like you need them because they're literally almost following the same steps they followed to progress in their career, and sometimes there's not too much emphasis in that, and then being also a minority, we're already outnumbered in the field of engineering. It's like, okay, I need someone to help me, show me the ropes to find my way. So I think mentors are really key in that engineering experience. Absolutely. Last question. What fun thing do you do that people will be quite surprised to find an engineer doing? People think we're so serious. I'm like, guys, not really.
Yeah, we have a life
really,
too.
But not really.
We have a life just outside work too.
Yeah.
I'd say my non-engineering thing that I like to do is that I love to dance. I've been dancing for like quite a long time. Like,
what kind of dance?
So I've dabbled in quite a few different things. I'd say from when I was young, I used to dance in like traditional Nepalese dancing. So I'm originally from Nepal, and I used to do traditional Nepalese dancing, and like I've performed in like schools and talent shows and things like that. So I've done that growing up, and then like around, I'd say my GCSE A-level times, I really got into K-pop. So then I used to do I had a YouTube channel and everything. I used to post K-pop dance covers, and I was quite into it too. Yeah, and then university too, I got into street dance, hip hop dance. And I was in the hip hop dance society, and I was in committee and everything. So a whole range of progressed.
Do you see yourself getting into anything else, or you think dancing is it for you?
I'll have to see. Yeah, I kind of since I've been in the industry, the working world, I kind of tone down my dancing. In my spare time, I like to go gym, go for walks, read, that sort of thing. But I do kind of miss dancing, so I might get back into it.
You might get back into
again.
You might get. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and giving us a very detailed view of what happens, what structural engineers do in keeping our buildings safe and making sure they're standing always. And like the analogy that you said, just like the human body, we have a skeleton that holds us in place.
Exactly.
The structures you are designing is providing structure for buildings, bridges, and that's how it's helping us to basically live. And thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hope I've answered your questions properly, and people do have got an appreciation of what structural engineers do. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out via Sophia. Yeah, I'd love to get in touch with anyone if they have any more questions.
Thank you very much.